just pop on and ask any questions that you might have.
I'll ask the first. How's this? I was watching an interview with Will Gordon, the kid who played his way onto the PGA Tour.
Mm-hmm.
And the interview, he said, I'm concentrating on watching the leaderboard, which is something I don't think I've ever heard anybody say before. He said, I'm going to have to be out here and going to have to get used to it. And I thought this was the perfect time to do it. Just wondered if you had heard that and what you thought about it, because I thought it was pretty cool.
Okay, say that again. He was watching the leaderboard?
He was watching the leaderboard. He was in contention pretty much all week.
Mm-hmm.
He had to finish, I think, tied for third to be able to get into the next week's tournament.
That two-way, just a two-way tie for third, correct?
Yeah, something like that. So he had been he's a 23-year-old kid, and he was watching the leaderboard, and I just never heard anybody. I just like the mental game approach of some point I might have to be doing this, and maybe I'll be doing this every pro tour I'm out, every pro event I'm out here. And I've heard a lot of pros say, I was trying not to watch the leaderboard and play my own game.
Yes, that's right.
So I just thought this was kind of a different approach, and I was interested.
That's a great question. It really is an individual difference kind of thing. And that is, some people use it as a motivation. And for him, I think he was just not used to being in contention. He wanted to see, and he had a particular target that he was approaching. I think that the leaderboard for him might have told him what risks he had to take and what he didn't. If he found himself going into the last hole in fourth place, then he knew that he needed to make a birdie. One of the things that I teach is a game plan that is independent of score. So it's a little different kind of situation than what he's in. The game plan that's independent of score is you go into each hole as a separate event. And for that hole, your game plan for that hole is, how do I make for pros, how do I make birdie without taking unnecessary risk? For higher handicap amateurs, it would kind of be, how do I make net birdie without taking an unnecessary risk? And so for him, going down the stretch, if he knows that the difference for him, yeah, it's a money difference, but it's like a career changing difference between two-way tie for third and fourth place. That's a career changing difference. Between fourth and 10th, that has no difference in the impact on his career. So he, going down the stretch, knew that on the last hole, he needed to make birdie. It was not an unnecessary risk. He had to fire at that pin. Now, if he was already in a position of tie for third, then he might have aimed for the middle of the green, because that would give him the best chance for birdie, but without taking an unnecessary risk. Now, once he gets going, I had an interesting one. I had a pro who I said, try not to watch the leaderboard, because it would screw him up. And after the tournament, he had messed up on the 16th hole, and I said, what was going on there? And he said, well, I figured, I wasn't watching the leaderboard, but I figured that the leaders were about at 19 under, and I was at 17 under, and I needed to make something happen. I said, you did worse than watch the leaderboard. You created a leaderboard in your brain, but you were still watching the leaderboard, but it was your own, so it never disappeared, and it wasn't real. As it turned out, he didn't need to do that. He just needed to, again, play with that game plan, and he would have finished much higher. So that's a good question. Okay, so we have a couple of others. Ellis, hi Ellis, how are you? Could you expand a bit on walking meditation you alluded to in the previous session? Yes, the idea of walking meditation, and this very much applies to golf, because we're walking between shots. And, even if you're taking a cart, it doesn't hurt to park the cart not right up near your ball. Well, park it a few yards away and reconnect with the earth, with the ground as you're walking. So when we did the grounding practice in the previous session, it was about getting out of our heads, into our body, and really feeling the ground. In golf, what I teach players to do, and I've had some that need to have a little bit of a saying or a mantra, and as they're taking that full breath in and then breathing out, they breathe out and they go, breathe it down, feel the ground, or breathe it down into the ground. And it gets them out of their head and really feeling how their feet are pressing into the ground. Now, you want to maintain that for the few steps that you take as you walk into a dress. And really, that's a mini walking meditation, because all you're doing is feeling the ground as you're walking forward, but your eyes are looking out toward the target. In between shots, if you have the luxury of walking the course, like the old course that's there behind me, then as you walk, let your eyes tune into what you're seeing in an expansive way, but let your mind also tune into how the ground feels under your feet. And the walking meditation is that the main attention that you're paying is your posture and how your legs are moving, swinging, placing. Your leg moves and swings, your foot places. The next leg swings, places, swings, places. And some people actually use that label as they're walking. But you don't have to. If it's helpful, use it. If not, just feel your legs swinging and placing and the weight shifting from one foot to the next. Someone in the last section, was that Pat, I think, asked about using the breathing in golf. How does that work in golf? And as I said, before the shot, in your pre-shot, that grounding breath before you walk into a dress is very helpful. For some people in putting, after they've taken the last look at the ball, at the hole or the point that they're aiming at on the green, they get into their back into their putting posture, look down at the ball, and then as they breathe out, they feel like the breath is going out through their arms, and their arms and hands are softening, which lets them make a less jabby, more flowing stroke. Another place that people use the breathing is that they use it as a trigger for takeaway on a full swing shot. So for example, you're up, you're over the shot, you're all set. Let's say you have your driver in your hand. You look out to the fairway, and then as you look back, you take a breath in, and as you breathe out, just before the breath is all the way out, you start taking the club back. Or midway through the breath going out, you start taking the club back. So it's a natural flow and a natural trigger that's not abrupt, but it's a natural flowing. So those are some. Now, after the shot is another place you use your breathing, because you might hit a really bad one and you need to calm yourself down. So after you hit the shot, this is part of your post-shot routine. Go, ah, and then say, oh, take a breath, calm down. Where did that come from? And when you breathe and calm down, that clears your mind so you can actually reflect on what got in the way. And it may have been as simple as the last thought you had was, don't hit it in the lake. And that just completely screwed up how you swung the club. And you go, well, that's not a good last thought to have. I need to have my last thought be out to the fairway. That's another good example. Okay, well, Stuart wrote a question that actually connects with this. I've had a few clients who can send the ball a long way from the tee when they play well, however, get very angry when it goes wrong. Any tips for staying calm in the pre-shot and the shot when that is on their mind? Okay, so we're talking about them. All right. That's good, Stuart. Hopefully it's not, I have a friend who has this problem, but in any case, they hit it a long way from the tee. Well, the longer you hit it, the easier it is to reach the trouble. As they say, the woods are full of long drivers. So one of the things that you need to make sure they understand is the farther you hit it, basically it's going to go out in a vector, like a fan shape. Okay. Well, if you only hit it this far, see, the fan only reaches to my shoulders. But if I hit it farther, and I'm off the screen. I missed the fairway. Now, this particular fairway we're looking at, that's not easy to miss. That's the 18th and the first fairways that there's no separation. So you got plenty of room there. But so the first part, they get very angry. If you're working with them, you have to say, okay, yes, of course you got angry. Nobody's happy when they hit one that goes haywire. But how well does staying angry help you? Use it as a tool, use it as an energy, and say, I'm going to channel that anger into being more focused and pay better attention and more tuned in and more present on my next shots. So I've got a couple of things. One is they get angry when things go wrong. The breathing is the first step. Clarify and resolve. And this is really important. If something went wrong and they don't know what happened, that's going to keep them freaked out. But if they can take a breath and analyze for a bit in the post-shot routine, okay, what got in the way there? And if they say, you know what? I was trying to kill it. Or I saw trouble on the left and that's why I blocked it out to the right. Or I saw trouble on the right and that's why I hooked it to the left. Resolve it and say, what do I need to do better in my pre-shot? That's very helpful. The other thing that they can do, especially if it's a whole hole that they messed up, and you don't want them to carry it on to the next holes. And I've had a lot of success with this, really with junior golfers. I say, walk off the green, turn around, and pretend you're slamming a door. You get a little of that anger out of your system. It kind of feels good to do that. And you have slammed the door. The door is closed on that. You can't do anything about what just happened other than learn from it and resolve to play the next hole better. Now, if you're still holding on to it and you say, I'm going to make up for it on this hole, two things can happen. You can channel that anger and really smack that next drive. Or the anger can take control of you, and you can hit the next drive even more wild. And then you start the death spiral. It's not death. You're not going to die from it. But you're going to go into a very, very dark place. And that's not much fun for everybody else who's playing. So, again, They need to get to resolve the last shot so they can get it off of their mind, know what they did, and use their pre-shot routine to do something other than that on the next one. Stuart, does that clarify, or do you have any more you want to do on that? Okay, I got a thumbs up from Stuart. Anybody else? We have a quiet session today. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that have been going on. And this is a recent lesson that I had. The S word. It was actually a golf writer who's going to be doing an article. It should come out. I think it's on golf.com about shanking the ball. And I noticed it was something that happened to the leader in the tournament in Hartford. The leader in that tournament was, I think he only had 3 or 4 holes to go, and had a bad line near the green that came from a kind of guidey approach shot with a wedge. Shanked it right over the green, put himself in trouble, ended up making triple bogey, I think, and took himself out of the tournament. Out of winning the tournament. He didn't take himself out of the tournament, but out of winning the tournament. So this golf writer said, why are we so superstitious? We don't even want to hear that word. And he said he'd never done it before, but this guy he was playing with kept talking about it, and suddenly there it was. So I talked about some interesting things. One is we have superstitions because they actually are rooted in an actual occurrence. Somebody walked under a ladder and a can of paint fell on his head. And so it becomes bad luck to walk under a ladder. It becomes bad luck to say one of those words. It's so superstitious that we have a sportscaster's jinx. He hasn't missed a fairway since the 3rd hole of the 2nd round. Boink, out it goes. And the sportscasters even think that they had something to do with it. Well, that's going back a few thousand years into mythical and magical thinking. That those kinds of thoughts could affect something. I love the Budweiser, I think it's a beer commercial, I'm not sure which, the beer commercial where the guy goes down in the basement to get some beer and the team scores. So every time the team gets in the red zone, his buddies send him down to the basement. So it goes, when you were down there, the team scored, so get out of here. You're bad luck, or you're good luck when you go. So we have all these superstitions, but they come from something happening. And why is it always about something, often about something bad that happens? It's because we focus more on and remember more negative situations. And this applies to the people getting angry and remembering bad things about their rounds. I ask people to tell me, so what was your round like? And they go, well, I triple bogeyed the last hole. But other than that, and they start out with what went wrong. They always start out with what went wrong. Well, you can take it back to prehistoric times. A good experience has a certain amount of reinforcing and association and impressing the experience on you. So if you happen to be walking down a path and saw this particular rock formation, and on the other side there was this great fruit tree, well, that's good to remember. It's good to remember. But if you don't remember it, you won't die. However, if you see this rock formation, you walk around the other side and you see that it's a bear's den and you hear a growl, that might be good to remember. Because if you don't remember it and you go there, you die. You don't get another chance. You get another chance to look for the fruit tree, but you don't get another chance to avoid the bear. So we are hardwired to make a bigger deal of things going wrong. Here's a classic. I had a student, he said, I hit the ball, I hit a great drive, it caught the cart path, bounced into the woods. I was furious, bad break. And I said, have you ever hit one in the woods and the ball hits a tree and bounces out to the fairway? He says, oh yeah. I said, do you get upset? He said, no. I said, why not? He said, oh, because I got a good result. I said, but you said that the ball hitting the cart path and bouncing into trouble wasn't fair. And that's why you got upset. Well, hitting a tree and bouncing into the fairway isn't fair. You should get upset and you should say, boy, I just don't deserve that. No, we get more upset about the negative situation. And when something bad happens, oh, that's not fair. When something good happens, we go, oh, that was nice. Little double standard there. Little double standard. So that's why we tune into that. And that's why as soon as you hear the word, you don't think of all the times you hit a pitch shot that didn't do that. You only think of the time that when you got the hosel rocket and went off to the right. Now, the interesting thing is that's the name. It's a hosel rocket. Why? Because when that shot goes shooting off to the right, high handicappers think they hit it with the toe. But that's not what happened. It caught between the toe and the shaft, right in there in the hosel, and that's why it bounced off to the right. So you actually hit a shot that was very, very close to really good. And the remedy is an actual counterintuitive or counterinstinctive. Try to hit your next pitch shot with the toe of the club. About where the grooves on the club meet that space near the toe where there aren't any grooves. I think some clubs now they're grooving all the way through, but basically about half an inch from the toe. Try to hit it there. Guaranteed, you won't shank it. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. Pat wrote, it's the incursion by an external thought that affects my shot, usually in the middle to later round. Work, home, outstanding issues. When should I start to clear my mind before the shot? Well, that's a great question. First, you can't clear your mind and empty it. What you want to do is kind of like, it's like you have a glass of water that's got muddy water, and you could dump it all out, but that would be aggressive. Instead, just keep pouring in clear water and replace it. So what we want to do is not think we can clear our mind, but practice right from the beginning to have in our mind what we choose to have in our mind. And that is end the conversation you're having with yourself and fill your mind, be mindful of what you're feeling. Again, I talked about the ground under your feet and the image, the visual image in your mind of the ball heading to the target, or this, if not the ball heading to the target, at least the spot on the fairway where you want it to go. Now, what you're talking about midway to later in the round is what I call Amen Corner. Amen Corner at the Masters is 11, 12, and 13. And it's right there when people make some bad decisions. Why? Because you're 2/3 of the way through the round, you're a little more tired. Maybe you ate too much at the turn and most of the blood is going to your stomach instead of your brain. Maybe you're a little dehydrated. For sure, psychologically, earlier in the round, there were plenty of holes to make up for a mistake. Now you're at the point where you can see the finish line, but there aren't quite enough holes to make up for a mistake, and you're not quite close enough to put in that last adrenaline kick. So that Amen Corner is like a perfect storm. where you make some bad decisions, or as Pat wrote, work home outstanding issues. Hey, you realize you're 2/3 of the way through the round, you only have a few holes to go, and you start getting ahead of yourself. What am I going to have to do after the round? What am I going to have? I gotta talk with so and so. I gotta return some phone calls, things like that. That's when they come in. So right then, it's not that you need to clear your mind starting then, but you do have to be aware that after you make the turn, that it's easier for your mind to get a little distracted. So be more aware. Take a couple of extra breaths. We also pick up our pace a little bit, so slow things down a little bit. Tom Watson said that he finally broke through his jinx about not winning the US Open by doing more breathing and walking more slowly on the back nine on Sunday. So I hope that's helpful. Jenny, what tips would you give well, actually, before I go, Pat, did that answer your questions? I don't hear him. You can unmute yourself.
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Okay, Jenny says, what tips would you give to a player to keep their concentration going throughout the whole round? Oh, what do you know? Halfway through the round, goes off for a few holes and then comes back in. I just answered your question. It's that amen corner. Right then is where it goes off and then comes back in near the end of the round. So the tips are to be aware that that's coming and say, here we are, and let's, we're so funny. Right then, about 2/3 of the way through, we've been hitting this beautiful, shaped shot. Maybe it's a draw, maybe it's a fade. We get to one hole and we go, I think I'll do something different because that's just been working so well all day. Why don't I got a bright idea. I'll do something different. Or we hit shots we have no business hitting. These bright ideas, which aren't so smart, come up right then during that time. Pat, you did have a further question. Start to clear as I approach the ball with the settling breath. Yeah, I think I did mention that, and that is something that is a good thing to do. You can even say to yourself, I'm done with my pre-shot routine and the thinking about those things. Now, I have a special technique for you, and you can do the breathing and say, breathe it out, back to here and now. But I have a special technique for you about those thoughts for off the golf course. And I've given this to a number of pros. I know Christy Kerr used them very well because she had a lot of business interests and family stuff going on, a new baby, and all sorts of stuff that were coming into her mind. And so what I have you do is, before you go out on the golf course, if you're at a club and you have a locker, you can put this in your locker. Otherwise, leave it in your car. Have a little Tupperware container, like a little box. Here, I've got a little container, something like this, like a jewelry box, or see that little container like that, just that big, okay? And you take the top off and you say, okay, I'm going to put my thoughts in here about everything else in my life than playing golf. And you have to be kind to your thoughts. Thoughts about work, thoughts about family, and you say, now you wait here, wait for me, because one, I can't do anything about you while I'm on the golf course. And two, you're not going to help me play better by thinking about you. Okay, so you wait here, and number three, I promise I will deal with you when I get back. And then you put the lid on, right? And you leave it in your car or in your locker. And now you're set. Now, let's say it's the 12th hole and the thought of work comes up. And you go, oh, what are you doing here? You say this to your thought. What are you doing here? I left you in the box in the locker. Now, I want you to go back there, and because you're not going to help me play any better, and there's nothing I can do about you till I'm finished with the round. But I promise, when I'm done with the round, I'm going to come and pick you up, and I will relate to you that. So off you go. It may come up a few times. Each time you do the same thing. What are you doing here? You're not going to help me play better. I can't do anything about you. I promise I'll deal with you when I'm done. Go back. And that's what you do about those thoughts that come in. Okay. How do professionals deal with playing in front of large crowds or to use them to their advantage? Well, that's interesting. The pros that I've talked to, they like having people root for them. And they take the attitude that they're there to entertain people. Now, some of them are there to entertain the people by acting funny like Bill Murray, but the pros are there to entertain people by performing incredible shots that they couldn't do themselves. Like Bryson DeChambeau's 358-yard drive. Wow, that's what the crowds are there for. So the pros have the attitude that the crowds are looking for good shots. Now we know how satisfying it is when we see a pro hit a bad shot. We go, ha ha, they're human. But we still are watching to see those amazing, great shots. They're really cool. So the pros feed off the energy of the crowd that they're going, yeah. And the pros are going, yeah, look how good I am. I got this. I got this. And they're energized by it. Now, at the same time, pros that are not used to that they find themselves in contention in a big tournament, it can make them anxious. And I was on the Golf Channel the night before the final round of the U.S. Open. I was on a panel. And they asked, well, we have a journeyman who's leading the tournament. How do you get him to relax and play, imagining that he's just out for a round with his buddies on Sunday? A weekend round with his buddies. I said, I wouldn't try to do that. And they were surprised. I said, no, that's not the right psychology. He can't pretend that it's not a big deal. It's a big deal. So he needs to channel that energy and the nervousness into positive focus. As Helen Hayes, the great actress, said, after 50 years on Broadway, I still get the butterflies, but I know that my job is to make them fly in formation. So that's the job of the pro, to take that excitement and treat it as, I have a chapter in Zen Golf called, You Can't Stop the Waves, but You Can Learn to Surf. You can't stop those waves of energy and adrenaline as you get into the home stretch or the final round. But if you interpret them as nervousness and an omen of disaster, that's not so good. Instead, if you interpret it as excitement and that you're in contention and you have a chance to win, then you fly those butterflies in formation and you turn them into intensity or fire and focus. Fire and focus. It's interesting now, they're playing the tournaments with no crowds. There aren't people out there, except when they get near the clubhouse and then the members can applaud. But otherwise, there's no audience, there's no crowds. It's much more disconcerting to them to have no one. It's okay to have no one, it's okay to have a lot of people. One or two people that happen to be walking in their putting line or something like that, that's much more disconcerting. But having a big crowd, even if there's noise, it turns into white noise. Like the 16th hole at the TPC Scottsdale, at it's Phoenix, the Waste Management Open. There are 10,000 people in the stands, and they're all talking and all making noise. They don't hear any of it because it's white noise. And in fact, it's a special technique that I teach. I think this is in the golf, the art of the mental game. if there's let's say there's a construction site happening near the golf course and you're not sure when a hammer is going to hit, you can add to the noise. Pretend you're in a stadium filled with people going, add noise, and then any sounds become part of that white noise. Okay, that's pretty good. Does that answer your question? Any others?
It does answer my question, and the other part was that I couldn't quite understand why they thought that the Ryder Cup couldn't go ahead if there was no crowd, when it makes no difference to me sitting watching it on the television, but obviously it does to the players.
And what did you say? The Ryder Cup.
Yeah, if the Ryder Cup.
Can't go along without the crowds. I think that's two things. One, it really does jazz the players up to play in front of essentially a home crowd. And each of them have their home crowds rooting for them. But the other thing is that the entertainment for us at home is partly the rowdiness of the crowds and the excitement and that it is a sporting event rather than just a golf tournament. It's a little bit more like the World Cup than I did tune into well, you're there in Europe, so it's a football match, what we'd call a soccer game, that was being played. There wasn't anybody in the stands. And, it wasn't quite the same. And this is interesting. I was watching a comedy show where the guy sits behind the desk and he presents his stuff, and it wasn't as funny as when he had a studio audience. So there is something about the energy that combines from the crowds. And I think that they didn't want to lose that in the Ryder Cup and have a kind of like lukewarm version of it. That's my opinion. I don't know for sure, but that's what I would guess. See, so no questions. So we use that as the opportunity to stop, drop, and breathe until someone has one. Here's our little golfer meditation. And this is something you can do, let's say you're waiting at the tee. Just turn away from everybody and take a few breaths. Come back refreshed. Well, I think that's enough for today. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated. And I think we're probably going to do 2 weeks from today. Every 2 weeks seems about right. So 2 weeks from today, please feel free to share the email. We'll send out an email with the Zoom links. They may, they'll probably be the same ones we used today. I think that worked okay. And we'll send that out. And we'll do this in a couple of weeks, both a mindfulness session first and then the golf Q&A. All right, take care, everybody.